Hey, sorry about that, guys. You know how demanding family can be when you're an entrepreneur. So where were we? That's right. We were working on our growth plans for our businesses for 2020 and beyond. And I was giving you guys all my secrets, right? Oh, are you new here? If so, welcome. I'm CP. Let me get you caught up. So this is actually part 2 of a 3-part series on growing your business with an amazing growth plan. So if you didn't get a chance to go back and see part 1, you're going to want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put that up here in the cards because you're really going to want to get caught up. Otherwise, you'll have no idea what's going on here. And I want you to pay close attention to that whole thing I say about being an asshole because I am really serious about my tolerance for assholes. To the rest of you that have been around and that are CPTV followers, grab your workbooks and your pens and let's get back to work. All right, my love. So let's do a quick recap to where we are from the last piece of this series, part 1. We actually reviewed what planning is in that particular part. We talked about the first 4 major pieces of what's going to be included in your overall growth plan. We also talked about some of my secrets to help you actually do the research that you need yourself without paying heaps of money to get them done. And you guys got your workbooks. Now we are going to talk about the 4 big remaining pieces of what's going to go into your plan. And we're going to get into the how, right? We're going to begin to talk about how you're going to get all of this done. And I promise you, if you follow all 3 parts of this series, you'll be able to get this amazing growth plan for 2020 and beyond done in less than 1 week. All right, so let's dive into the 4 remaining pieces of this plan. And then we get to talk about the how, which is actually my favorite part of this entire process. So let's talk about part number 5 of the plan. Now, we talked about the overall strategic goals. Now we're talking about part number 5, which is your strategic objectives or initiatives. So a lot of people get very confused with the difference. Initiatives. Don't judge me, guys. Didn't we talk about my spelling issues? I never said I could spell, although I did win a spelling bee when I was in 8th grade. I don't know what happened. I think Microsoft Word killed that. But anyway, strategic objectives and initiatives. I always get the question about what's the difference between a goal and an objective. Well, a goal is the overreaching thing that we talked about in part 1, right? Your overall strategic goals. An objective is the specific things that you're going to do in order to get that done. So that's why I interchange the word objective and initiative in this piece, because some people identify better and have a clear understanding of an initiative, meaning something I'm about to do, versus objective. So for this purpose, I'm going to use them both, but I'm typically talking about initiative just to keep it clear for you. So you want to make sure that you come up with your strategic initiatives, and those strategic initiatives have to have a couple of things going on with them. So as you're thinking through this process, I want to make sure that you know they need to be smart. And I know we've already talked about smart, but I want to make sure we talk about it again. Being smart means that they have to be specific, measurable, achievable. They have to be reasonable, and they have to be timely, meaning you have to be able to get them done in a specific amount of time. They can't be way out there so that you can't actually do it. So when you're coming up with what these objectives are, and it's just you're a solopreneur, you got to take that into consideration when you're trying to come up with what's going to be achievable, what's going to be realistic, and what's going to be timely. If it's you and you have a team of 15, let's just say, all right, well, maybe they can be a little bit more lofty because you're going to have other people that you can actually delegate them to. But let's just say it's just you and you really do want to do an initiative to get to that goal that involves other people. Well, then maybe one of those initiatives will include hiring an additional person, getting a virtual assistant, expanding your team, and preparing to scale, right? So that's what your overall strategic objectives is. And I've got an example of what one looks like just so that you know. So remember, in part 1, we talked about the overall organizational objective was to improve the framework, right? So I want to make sure that we reiterate that so that you can put it in perspective. That overall organizational goal was to improve the framework of the overall organization in all departments so that we could move forward in our sales and service targets. Well, To give you an example of what a strategic initiative under that particular goal would be. So for me, it would be to create and improve all of our human resource practices, policies, and procedures to support 100% growth in our staff by 12/31/2020. Right? So that's the initiative. In order for me to increase our capacity and to improve our infrastructure in all of our areas, I've got to work on making sure that I've got human resources in place, human resource policies in place, because I know that means I'm going to have to hire staff. So that gives you an example of how they kind of go together. This would be my initiative underneath that overall goal. And as you can see, it has some specific components in it, right? It talks about 100%. Increasing by 100%. This is measurable. It's very specific. It talks about human resources policies. It talks about procedures. It talks about practices. That's very specific, right? It also talks about, it has a deadline date. So 12/31/2020. So that means it's timely. And is it reasonable? Absolutely. I think that it's reasonable for me to make sure I'm creating my human resource infrastructure by the end of next year. I've got a whole year to do it. And that means if I got to reach out to somebody, I got to get some stuff, all that kind of stuff, then that means that I can ultimately do it, right? And that takes me to the next step, the next piece of your plan. After the strategic objectives, and I kind of did a nice little transition. Y'all like how I did that. Number 6 is the actual action items. The action items that you are going to have to do in order to get it done. So I started to alluding in it when we talked about what the 5th component was, that overall strategic initiative. And I said, I've got to improve all of my human resource practices, policies, and procedures so I can increase my staff by 100% by 12/31/2020, right? Well, in order for me to do that, now I've got to work through the specific things in order that I've got to do in order to get that accomplished. And that could be anything, right? So in order for me to kind of create human resource policies and procedures and practices, in order for me to hire somebody that's going to help me by the end of next year, I first have to say to myself, well, what do I know about human resources? I don't really know a whole lot. Maybe I need to begin to educate myself about it, or maybe I need to get a mentor, or maybe I need to get a coach or something to help educate me on HR. So that's going to be my step number 1 in order to accomplish that initiative, right? So I'm going to be like, research and get help in HR. That's my first step, right? Then once I get that help, I'm going to create a skills analysis so I know who to hire, right? And then once I get the skills analysis, I'm going to create the job description for my new position. So you kind of get where I'm going with this, right? Now, one thing that I haven't addressed with you just yet in this particular area is, when do I do all of this? So if you go back to that initiative that I just mentioned to you, that deadline date, if you recall, was 12/31/2020. Well, that means that all of these action items, all of these things here have to be done by 12/31/2020 in order for me to have accomplished that overall initiative. So that means working backwards from my timeline is how I figure it out. So my last step, let's just say, would be hire staff person. Right? And then mine would be like, interview, I'm just throwing this out here, and onboard. Or something like that. No, interview, not on board, because I have to hire them first. So I'm going to go backwards. So if I've got to get the whole thing done by 12/31/2020, now I'm going to hire a staff person. So I got to have this staff person hired by 12/15/2020 in order for me to meet my goal, which means I got to have my interviews done by 12/1/2020, which means I got to have my job description and give myself maybe 90 days to go through the process. So if I go back 90 days, I want to make sure that I've got this done by 9/1/2020. And then I got to create my skills assessment and give myself a month because I got a lot going on and I'm a busy person. So remember, I'm making it realistic. I'm going back to that SMART thing. To create my skills assessment, I got to go back, give myself at least a month to 45 days. So maybe I want to have this done by 7/1/2020. And in order for me to get to that point, I got to research, find an HR coach, maybe enlist a service, maybe take an online course, whatever it is. So I want to make sure that I've got all my stuff done in order to create my skills analysis and give myself 60 to 90 days to get that done. So I want to have all this done by the end of the first quarter, 4/1/2020. You see how that works? That's ultimately what we're going to do with those action items. And that, again, is the sixth most important component of what your growth plan is going to look like. So you're going to do this. You're going to do the action items for every single initiative. And you're going to do several initiatives for every single goal. And by the end of it, you're not only going to have what you want from a goal perspective, but you're going to have exactly how you got to get it done and when you got to get it done. So let's move on to step number 7. And the seventh most important component of your overall plan, and that is your key performance indicators. Now, a lot of people have heard, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're in business, you got to make sure you hit your KPIs. You got to make sure you hit your KPIs. It's true. I'm not talking about, however, the financial KPIs, key performance indicators that investors look for, or that partners look for, meaning, our growth rate and our profit margins. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that you've got to make sure that you've got some type of evaluation feature in your plan to be able to tell yourself whether you successfully completed it or whether you didn't. And so what are going to be your key performance indicators for you to know that you performed well in the implementation of your growth plan? And this is where I'm going to give you another CP secret, because this is where you're going to measure whether or not you're doing a good job and whether or not you are sticking to it and whether or not you're really doing it. And I can tell you the difference between success in my business and not having success has been the implementation of this overall growth plan. It makes no sense for you to do all this work, put this plan together, put it in a drawer and never look at it again. So your key performance indicators, my recommendation is CP secret, which is overall, in order for you to know that you've done a good job at delivering and implementing on this plan, overall, you must complete 90% of all of your organizational initiatives by their deadline date. Complete 90% of all initiatives by or before their deadline date. How do you figure that out? Very easily. If you've got 10 initiatives, you got to get 9 of them done on time. If you've got 20 initiatives, you got to get 18 of them done on time. That's what I mean. It's really, really simple. And in order for you to do that, that means on a monthly basis, you've got to look at what was due that month, because overall, you got to look at what was due that month. Sorry. Technical difficulties. You got to look at what was due that month and you have to check it off like a list of things to do. Take this seriously. Are you trying to play or have a big glorified hobby, or are you trying to have a business that's going to be sustainable and grow with you into the future? If you're about sustainability, you're going to do what I say, and your key performance indicators is your overall completion 90%. That's my recommendation. No more needs to be said about that. Just plug that right into your overall growth plan, right? Remember what I said about an asshole and my tolerance for them. Don't be one of those guys. You're here, you clicked on this episode and you're watching it because you wanted to know how to put a growth plan in place. Well, I'm telling you, and I didn't say it was going to be easy. I just said it's going to be necessary. So let's make it happen, all right? And finally, this last piece of what needs to be included, the major piece of what should be included in that overall growth plan, number 8, is your organizational chart. What's your organizational chart? Hopefully you have a little bit of an idea of what an org chart is, but really briefly, it's really just a listing of everyone in your organization right now. So all the people who work in your organization, everyone in your org right now, plus everyone that you're going to be adding in the following year. And sometimes people ask me, oh, what should it look like? Should the CEO be up here? And then, an admin over here. And then, you got your CEO and then you've got like department heads and then you've got, people under them. Yes, whatever. whatever you want it to look like. You know, I've got some people who like to put their organizational charts like this, and you know, like I don't care how you do it. You know, just do it. You need to be able to visually see where your organization is growing, and you need to ultimately be able to have that, because when you do add employees, when you do begin to scale for growth, if you're at that point right now where you're thinking about, all right, in 2020, I know I'm going to have to add to my team and I just don't know what to do. Don't worry, I got you. We got a whole series coming up on that. But ultimately, you want to make sure that you can visually see who you're adding. And this is where you get to check them off, right? So if the first thing on your organizational chart right now is you as a CEO and all you got to do is do an admin, you know how good it feels at the end of the year to be able to check that off? Or you're going to add a manager over something, or you're going to add this manager, and you get to kind of look at that. That's the last piece of your growth plan. And it will ultimately tell you and anybody else that you're going to be talking to about this plan that, boom, this is what my plan is, and this is what I'm going to look like at the end. This is what my org chart is going to look like at the end. And I would also tell you, this is really important, because if you're not holding yourself accountable and you realize that you're not going to be good at holding yourself accountable, then my recommendation is get a mentor, get a coach, get somebody in your life who is going to hold you accountable for this growth plan. Because I can guarantee you, you knock out all these action items month to month, and at the end of 2020, you are going to look back and say, oh my God, I achieved that 6-figure, 7-figure business that I wanted to, all because I really sat down and thought about what it was that I wanted to achieve. I wrote out a game plan. I was very strategic, and I implemented the game plan. So your org chart is a great visualization, and it also helps somebody hold you accountable. Whew. Now that we have the major pieces of your plan in place, it is time for me to talk to you about the biggest secret of them all. How are you going to do all of this? But before I reveal the big secret, I need some love. Make sure you subscribe, hit that button down in the lower left corner, like, share, comment, give me some feedback. Are you rejuvenated? Are you excited about getting your business plan together? If so, let me know. Okay, so back to the big secret. Drum roll, my big secret is presidential retreats. I take them every year. You know, like the Bill Gates Think Week. Actually, I didn't even know that Bill Gates did the exact same thing until I was actually working with a client and I said, you got to take a presidential retreat. And he goes, Bill Gates does those. So let's dive into what they are and talk specifically about how you're going to get that done.
Cheryl, excuse me, Cheryl?
Yeah?
Yeah, we need you. Can you come here, please?
Oh, sure. Sorry, guys. I'll have to fill you in on the specifics of the presidential retreat or the Bill Gates Think Weeks in next week's episode. But I want you to continue working through your workbook. Get through the other sections and start thinking through some of those things, because next week I'm going to focus in and dive really specifically in on how you're going to get all of this done and how you can walk away in less than a week with your entire growth strategy in place for your business. So until next time, I got to go take care of this, you know, being the CEO and all, but talk to you soon, love. Bye.